I think that Pakistan is just very well positioned for tech-enabled companies trying to solve these challenges, really good entrepreneurs, even though there haven't been a lot of exits from, I would say, venture capital-backed models in the past. It feels very similar to what we were seeing in Indonesia, let's say 8-9 years ago. I definitely believe that you can build businesses that achieve really strong positive environmental or social impact, and also become some of the most powerful companies out there. The way that we define impact at Patamar is that we want to invest in companies that are serving the mass market, so low and middle income populations. What we do is that we've been taking a lens of how you invest into companies serving the mass market, so we understand the challenges faced by the customer base, by reaching certain types of populations, by building things from kind of at low and middle income sectors, when maybe for a long time the early venture capital fund managers were only focused on high income groups or enterprise services or your basic information technology services before you had widespread adoption of mobile. But now as that access is coming through, we're actually starting to see more venture capital firms invest alongside us into those companies or even target those companies on their own. I mean, everybody's believing in that story. Patamar is actually a Portuguese word for a type of boat, so a dhow boat, which goes around the Indian Ocean. And really what it was used for was to deliver goods between different ports. And we thought it played really well with what we were trying to do. We've done a lot of investments in supply chains and distribution chains, more tech-enabled ones, obviously. And so we actually think it's just it has strong symbolism of what we've tried to do, which is help our portfolio companies grow in those certain sectors, but then also help them move to other markets when they're ready to do so. My introduction to impact investing came when I met my business partner, who was a 35-year venture investor in the US and Europe. He had been sharing with me how he kind of walked away from those more traditional funds and had started doing venture capital investments into microfinance banks around the world. So I had a deep interest in human rights work, but then when I'd gone back to business school, decided that venture was kind of the more interesting thing to me. And so when I met him and heard about his venture investments into microfinance institutions, a huge light bulb went off for me, which is, wow, this actually is something that people do. So we started working on a bunch of different ideas, different opportunities, which led us to build Patamar. Patamar is about 10 years old now, and so we started focusing on Southeast Asia and South Asia. Some of the markets that we were really focused on at the time were our key markets: Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines. But always thought to ourselves, hey, as other markets develop, we want to actually have more of a pioneering role of going in and hopefully being a force in those early stage ecosystems as they get right to the point where we think that we can be involved and actually do some pretty cool things. The problems that our portfolio companies are trying to solve are things such as economic inefficiencies. How do you, when you have a supply chain that's really broken or fragmented and can actually be a lot more efficient, deliver goods and services more effectively, and actually benefit not only the consumer, but also small-scale producers, small and medium-sized businesses, and just create more inclusive economic growth. So we think that being able to use technology platforms to do that will not only help those producers themselves, those customers actually get access to what they need. Local entrepreneurs most of the time tend to be focusing on those same sorts of questions. And what we're trying to do is just say, hey, what we've learned in other markets, how does this resonate with you as you're thinking about solving this problem? Because we don't think that we have all the answers. What we think we have is kind of more of a data set which can be applied. We'd like to be really involved early on with our portfolio company management teams. And one of the other things that we do is we work pretty closely in each of our markets with a number of key business families who want to see the same sorts of success. They want to see companies being built to serve the mass market. That'll create, stronger economies. That'll create more opportunity for people in low and middle income segments. And that's good for their businesses. A number of them end up investing into our fund. So obviously they've got some vested interest in wanting to see them succeed, not just from a financial perspective, but also from an impact perspective. If I were to make a pitch to our investor base on why we should make investments into Pakistan companies that are trying to solve pretty big challenges, it would be along the lines of what we've thought about all of our markets. Pakistan, large population, really strong economic growth. One thing that I think is very unique about Pakistan is just a really strong population of folks with strong STEM backgrounds, so science, technology, engineering. And people who have actually, been working in businesses for quite a long time within this market. So, I think that even more so as I've come here and I've actually had conversations with entrepreneurs here in Pakistan, I've been very blown away by the level of, sophistication and thinking through what their businesses would look like, how they're addressing different market opportunities, how they're thinking about the future, understanding the weaknesses of where their businesses are at the current time. And so it's almost a little bit different of a level than what we see in some of the other markets. So for me, I think there's a lot of headline risk that in the global news, people tend to think about Pakistan. But from our perspective, this is just an incredible market. Some of the things that we look for in the entrepreneurs that we back has to do with hyper-realism, really understanding the challenges that they're facing and understanding oftentimes how difficult it's going to be. Whenever I'm with an entrepreneur and they make it seem like it's all going to be really easy, that's when the hair on the back of my neck starts to stand up, and I think, I've never seen a company that was built that it was just so easy. The second is a hunger to learn and an openness to learn. And the reason why that becomes important is that the market dynamics that you're going to face, the preferences of your customers or the people that you're trying to serve, you think you understand, but when you're in the laboratory and then you go out into the real world, it changes. And then openness to talk about those challenges with your investors. And oftentimes, the real question is, why would an entrepreneur not be open with their investors? They may have selected the wrong investors who aren't also being hyper-realistic and understand how difficult this is. I would first focus on what does it take to really build a great, platform, technology-enabled business, or maybe if it's not a tech-enabled platform, but just really build a business in that sector that can win. Beyond that, I think it's still pretty early around what it means to do venture-type investing, and I think that both investors and entrepreneurs understanding what have been the formulas for success of how you incentivize your team, how you incentivize founders, how you incentivize your investor base to actually have strong alignment across the entire group of stakeholders is critical. It's like a marriage in a lot of ways, and you need to make sure everybody's facing the same realities, sharing the same opportunities, sharing the same challenges, trying to think through them together, because when you're building something from scratch, building something brand new, trying to scale it, there's principles and there's rules that tend to be followed, but there's no exact playbook for the business that you're trying to build. So it takes a tremendous amount of creativity, hard work, and openness amongst everybody involved in the company.